Hey Baylor fans, this is your call to gear up with Harley-Davidson of Waco. Whether you're hitting the open road or tailgating at McLean Stadium, we've got the ride to match your Bear pride. Check out our wide selection of new and pre-owned motorcycles, visit our service department, or shop all the latest gear and accessories to show off your Baylor spirit and Harley pride. Visit us today and find your freedom on two wheels. Harley-Davidson of Waco, where Baylor fans never ride alone. Visit in-store or at hdwaco.com. Sic Em Bears. Welcome back to the Sic Em Podcast, presented by Harley-Davidson of Waco. I'm your host, John Morris. On this week's episode, we're catching up with Baylor baseball legend and former major leaguer David Murphy. Murphy had an incredibly successful career in the green and gold that included a first-team All-America selection and went on to hear his name called in the first round of the 2003 MLB Draft. Now, after a long career in the majors, David Murphy is continuing to pour into the game he loves. Welcome in, David Murphy, to the Sic Em Podcast. It's great to see you. It's great to catch up with you here in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, good to be here. Always enjoy spending time with you, John.
You know, it's fun. We can keep up with you because you're on the air on Valley Sports Southwest and doing Rangers games, either doing the broadcast or doing pregame and postgame. So you've turned into quite the broadcaster, Dave. Congratulations on that.
Well, broadcasting's a little different than playing. I mean, it's just it's kind of hard to know how you're doing, and people are so complimentary. But I think either way, I mean, baseball's always been in my blood, so you can't play it forever. So I'm enjoying having any type of association with the team that was closest to my heart during my playing days.
Yeah, very nice. Glad it worked out that way because it's fun. And for the Rangers, how about hosting the All-Star game coming up? That's pretty cool. Will you have any responsibilities during All-Star week?
Yeah, I'm going to be around the ballpark. I think Major League Baseball has reached out to a lot of the alumni that live in the area to do autograph signings, or there's clinics and things like that. So I'm not exactly sure every responsibility that I have, but I will be active on Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, I believe. So I'm just going to be getting back from a road trip and then going right to it. But of all the baseball things that I've gotten to experience before, I've never been around any type of all-star game festivities. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. I mean, that's great. That'll be fun to have it just up the road in Arlington. Tell me about, let's go back to your Baylor days a little bit. And it's always a good story to tell and retell, sort of how you ended up at Baylor. Maybe it wasn't your first choice, but I think it ended up being your best choice. But you you kind of went from A&M to Texas, ended up at Baylor. I mean, you had some options in there.
Yeah, so grew up in Northwest Houston, and I think for no reason whatsoever, maybe because Texas A&M was close. There was just I followed him, and maybe I got to know the baseball program a little bit when I was probably in middle school. And then one of my sisters ended up going there. So I never went to a baseball game, but went to a few football games and just got to experience just the excitement of College Station and the pride of, being an Aggie. So that really stuck with me. And I always wanted to go to college at Texas A&M and play baseball. Well, obviously everybody knows, especially in the last week or two, the rivalry between Texas and Texas A&M. And so sure enough, the first recruiting letter I get is from the University of Texas. And so, you start thinking, all right, I can see myself going to Texas, because you get that recruiting letter and it's like they're the only school on your radar at the time. So eventually I did have the opportunity to take visits to both. And obviously there's a lot to offer in Austin. The facilities were amazing. The apartment buildings where we would have stayed were phenomenal. I went to Texas A&M, and just similar to what I expected and what I experienced as a kid, and going to the football games, and going inside the locker room at the baseball stadium, and going to Midnight Yell and things like that. Those were just cool behind the scenes opportunities that I didn't have in the past. But when I got the opportunity to meet Steve Smith and Mitch Thompson and Steve Johnigan, there was just something that couldn't be replaced at those other schools. When everybody's recruiting you, they're giving you the optimistic side of everything. They're telling you you're going to come in and you're going to have every chance to start as a freshman, which is what every recruit wants to hear, right? But there's something about those interactions with the Baylor coaching staff that it was more believable with those guys than it was at the other places. And so even though that I had confidence in who I was as a player, I also knew that I could go in as a freshman in college and I could stumble and I could fall into a slump. And so which coaching staff, if that happened and I didn't play up to the way that I thought I would, perform, which coaching staff was going to stick with me the most? And I thought that would be Baylor. So in terms of just, obviously you're going to get solid coaching on the baseball field at all of those places. But I feel like off the field, and in terms of being quality men and, establishing kids of character and being a good teammate and all that, I feel like Baylor was going to be my best option in terms of all of those things.
Wow, that's great. Turned out well, and I don't mean to say this lightly, but it was sort of divine intervention that you ended up at Baylor. It's the place God wanted you to be. You met Andrea, pretty early on, I think, right, when you came to Baylor, and kind of set your path, athletically, spiritually, academically, socially, every way here at Baylor.
Yeah, God wanted me there for sure. I could go on and talk about this forever, but it's amazing how God writes your story when you don't even care for him, when you kind of put him on the back burner. And, I wouldn't have said that when I was in high school because I attended church, on a as basic level as possible. But then once I got to Baylor and I accepted Christ and I realized what it was to have a relationship with the Lord, and then obviously my wife was integral in that. Andrea was integral in that. So no doubt, I tell people all the time that how important prayer is. Andrea talked about how she had prayed for her husband since she was a little girl. And I feel like so much of that is wrapped up in me going to Baylor, us meeting there, and the way that God kind of guided my steps.
Catch everybody up on your kids, 4 kids. How are they? What are they up to these days?
Yeah, so I'm going to have a senior, a sophomore, an 8th grader, and a 4th grader. So life is busy. We have volleyball, we have dance. I coach, both the boys, their baseball teams. We do a little bit of everything around here. There's other stuff going on. And the fact that we're going to have a senior, we've actually, Baylor's been one of the schools that we've visited. So, so now on the flip side, coming full circle, it would be interesting if we're Baylor parents. So who knows how that'll play out, but yeah, life is busy. I love being a dad and enjoy every bit of it. During the summer is nice just because we get to sleep past 7 during the school year. It's a little bit of a grind, as everybody knows, but yeah, we're hanging in there and we're enjoying it.
Send her down here. We need her at Baylor next year.
That's right.
And it is a different experience. I've talked to people who come at it from a different angle, went to Baylor, and then as Baylor parents to come back around. It's almost a totally different experience, but I hope that works out. How's David Murphy, the coach, the baseball coach?
I think most people would laugh if they actually got to see me because, I keep it fun, but I can also be intense. I don't think I ever had any conflict with umpires throughout the course of my playing days. And as a coach, especially if you're wanting to stick up for your players, there's times where I show a little frustration out there. So I don't know. That's a really good question. I think more than anything, you would have to ask my players. I can get my son on here and you could ask him of all I think if anything, I've been given the opportunity to know the game of baseball pretty well. It's my one area of expertise. So maybe I try to learn from the way that I was taught. And I also try to learn from the kids and the players and just the best way to communicate information to them And also, like I said, when I brought up the example of the Baylor coaches, those are just a few of the examples of the coaches that I had. But what an impact that I have to not only rub off on these boys on the field and teach them the game of baseball, but more importantly, instill in them character and other qualities. Because, if I'm being realistic, I know that God touches college and professional athletes, and most of us, most kids don't get the opportunity to do that. So I'm keeping that in mind. I want them to enjoy it as much as possible, because the odds that most of them are going to play in college or beyond that's not realistic.
Sure. And that perspective, I think, makes you, I'm sure, a very good coach. Did you ever consider coaching full time, maybe at the college level or professional level?
It's not, I would never want to coach at the professional level, just because that lifestyle and the amount of travel. And if I'm trying to put family first, I think being a player is the only thing that I would ever do that would, keep me away that much. Coaching at the college level, I don't know if I quite understand the job description enough, because thinking about it through when I was a player, I don't know if it seems like, I don't know if I can envision all that the coaches did, especially from a recruiting standpoint, from a traveling standpoint, because I'm sure it's more of a full-time job, even though there is an off season mixed in there. I'm sure it gets pretty hectic. So I don't know. I would love to coach at some level. I on the field stuff, it really gets me excited. But at higher levels, I don't know that it would ever make sense from a family standpoint.
I got you. Along those lines, isn't it cool to have Mitch back as the head coach here? I know he was on staff when you were playing here, and now Mitch wins a national championship at McLennan and is back here as the Baylor head coach.
You talk about so deserving, and somebody that's been so instrumental in the Waco community, in the game of baseball, and all around. And I think it was really neat the way that it kind of it reestablished a lot of relationships between my former teammates and I, because we were all so excited. So it definitely brought up some of those connections all over again. We're so excited for him, and he's known as a great recruiter, and that's just one thing, but just a good baseball man, and just knows how to lead. He's one of the type of guy that he knows how to say and do the right things at the right time. He's a born leader, and there couldn't be a better guy to choose to lead that program.
Yeah. As you look back on it, this is kind of an odd question maybe, but did you enjoy baseball more at Baylor at the collegiate level, or enjoy it more at the professional level? Just pure baseball.
The minor leagues were a grind. So I don't know that I enjoyed too many days in there was a difference in the camaraderie with your teammates and riding on buses for a long period of time. So there were some similarities between that and college. But I think the special thing about college is that's the first time you're really away from home. So those are your teammates, and those are your brothers. It's just so many people talk about joining a fraternity or something like that. When you get to college, that's just built in for athletes. That's such a special thing that's so natural, and you spend so much time with them. And so, the big leagues were amazing, just because that's what I dreamed of doing my entire life. And I don't think there was a single day that I woke up and I took it for granted. I was riding high. I was on cloud 9 for all 8.5 years of service. And every day that I went to the ballpark, even the days that I was struggling, I realized that God put me in a special place, and that there are so many other people across the country that would just love to be in my position. And so I don't think I ever took that for granted. But college was a special stepping stone there, and I would definitely say that I enjoyed that more than the minor leagues. And it was a little bit more stress-free too, because once you get to the minor leagues and even in the big leagues, you're doing it because it's a business.
Right.
That the business side of it in college, it's not there. And even though you're hopeful of playing at a high level and getting to the big leagues, you still are kind of feeling out how good you are and if that's even possible. You think you can get drafted maybe, but you're trying to work your way up and work hard. So there's just something special about the camaraderie, about the joy, the energy of a college program.
Hey, Baylor fans, this is your call to gear up with Harley Davidson of Waco. Whether you're hitting the open road or tailgating at McLean Stadium, we've got the ride to match your Bear pride. Check out our wide selection of new and pre-owned motorcycles, visit our service department, or shop all the latest gear and accessories to show off your Baylor spirit and Harley pride. Visit us today and find your freedom on two wheels. Harley Davidson of Waco, where Baylor fans never ride alone. Visit in-store or at hdwaco.com. Sic Em Bears.
I think I remember this about you. Don't you have like an uncanny memory of specific games, events, big hits, things like that?
Yeah, I think people say that I do.
Yeah.
And just I guess in things, baseball. I mean, my mind, my heart are so geared toward baseball. I can remember a lot of specific moments that happened.
All right. When was your first? What do you remember about your first Baylor home run?
My first Baylor home run. I had been struggling. I finally started to heat up. It was on spring break, I believe. We were playing the University of Houston. It was against a left-handed pitcher, and it was a grand slam.
Oh, a grand slam.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a pretty good test of your memory. What about your first major league home run?
First major league home run was a cool one because at the time I was playing for the Boston Red Sox. Fortunately, we had the Red Sox were kind of out of the race in September of 2006. So even though I didn't get a ton of playing time, mid-September we had a Saturday and a Sunday. We had back-to-back day-night doubleheaders, and a lot of times the veteran guys, they don't want to play in both sides of a doubleheader. So I got 5 starts in the month of September, and three of them came that weekend. And so my first big league homer came in the first game on Sunday. Was against Jarrett Wright, who he started Game 7 of the '97 World Series, I want to say, for Cleveland. So the history of the game never got lost on me in terms of that. Like I could look at a guy across the field or a teammate and be like, oh, this guy did that or that or that. So Jarrett Wright. And I hit it a few rows deep into the short porch in right field at the old Yankee Stadium. And it was leading off the game. And I rounded the bases. I was such a deer in headlights that David Ortiz, who was hitting third, he steps out on deck and he opens his arms wide to give me a hug. I completely ran by him. And since I hit it in old Yankee Stadium as a member of the Red Sox, the fans didn't want the ball, so they threw it back. So I got the ball.
Nice. That worked out great. That's fun. That's good. What's the story in, I think it was 2014. You were involved. 2 balls were in play in a major league game in Cleveland at this point.
So it was really weird because I was on first. I believe Jan Gomes was the hitter. He hit a double to right field, and you're taught if the ball is behind you that far between the right center gap and the right field line, once you go to third base, if it's in front of you, you're your own base coach. But if it's behind you, you pick up the third base coach and you don't see the ball, right? And so I'm trusting my third base coach. I go first to third easily. And then I see this ball on the middle of the infield, and my third base coach is saying, stay right here, stay right here, stay right here. But my instincts are telling me, seeing that ball in the middle of the field, like, I can make it. I can go home. So I take off about halfway, and then I realize that somebody else, I forgot who even had the ball. The catcher gets it really quickly. I get in a rundown, and I get tagged out. And if you look at the replay, I point over at the ball that's standing there in the middle of the field. Well, if you watch the replay, basically at the same time that the right fielder threw the ball in from the fence, there was a pitcher, I believe, for the Reds. I think his name was Jumbo Diaz, and he overthrew the ball from the bullpen. And so two balls come in basically on the same line at the same time. and one of them ended up in a fielder's glove. One of them ended up in the infield. And it was tricky. So I guess there was maybe one other instance in Major League history where that had happened. But, I don't know. In my mind, thinking back on that, like that would be kind of a clever way to get an out if a team, like you could do it.
Yeah.
And say that you didn't. It would be an easy way to cheat. So I would think that there would be some way to overturn that rule, or just call the play dead if it happened.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think we ended up losing by 4. So if we lost by 1, I might have been kicking myself a little bit more, but it really didn't have anything to do with the outcome of the game.
That's wild. Another example of if you go watch a baseball game, you might see something you've never seen before. It's amazing how that happens.
You feel like you've seen it all, and to this day, there's still things that I see that I've never seen.
Yeah. You're from Klein High School down in the Houston area. Majority of your major league career with the Rangers. We'd be interested in your thoughts on this pretty intense rivalry that's developed between the Astros and the Rangers at a really high level.
I think it's a lot of fun because obviously you have to give your respects to the Astros and what they were able to do as a franchise, because right toward the end of my career, they experienced some tough years, and that's right when they were starting to turn things around. And I think they did it the right way. They drafted well. You bring in Altuve, you bring in Correa, you bring in Bregman, you start to acquire some pitching. Verlander was instrumental there, and they were one of those teams that was big on analytics for a while. So they were really able to turn some things around. And then the Rangers had some thin years, between, say, 2017 and leading up to last year. And then all of a sudden, the Rangers make some moves. They signed Seager and Semien a few years ago. And then you bring in DeGrom, you bring in Eovaldi. You have some guys like Jonah Heim and Nathaniel Lowe who and even say Ezekiel Duran, Leody Taveras, who really even out the lineup at the bottom last year, and they were just on fire to start, and they rode that all the way through last season. And I just think it was perfect the way that things lined up in the postseason where those two teams can meet in the ALCS, because it's great, when a team has been dominant for so long, you want to go through them, to either get to the World Series, or if it's a team of dominance that has been to the World Series and faced them. So it was great for the Rangers to be able to prove themselves. And it was a terrific series when you look back at it, and a lot of the clutch hits and a lot of the moments. So both teams are kind of underachieving at this point here in 24, but I would say with the talent level on both sides, you wouldn't be surprised if both teams are going to in September.
Yeah. You have good perspective. Rangers winning the World Series last year, and you were on the World Series teams in Arlington in 2010, 2011. What was that like? I mean, thinking back about y'all getting so close in 10 and 11, not getting the World Championship, but then being there very close, doing the games, broadcasting the games last year when they did win the World Series.
Yeah. So when I got traded away from the Red Sox, it's something that I really wanted, because I knew that was probably going to need to happen to establish myself from an individual standpoint and be able to play every day in the major leagues. Because at the time, my first year in 2006, they had Trot Nixon was leaving as a free agent, and part of me was just like, well, do I have a chance to replace him? They had Coco Crisp in center field, and Manny Ramirez was the left fielder for a few more years, and I knew I wasn't going to replace him, and probably not Coco. But then they ended up signing J.D. Drew to like a 5-year deal, and I'm like, well, the best opportunity I have is to be a fourth outfielder, and that's not something that I really want. So it was a blessing when I get traded to Texas, but I was also thinking at the same time from a team standpoint and wanting to, achieve a World Series. I don't know how likely that is. Well, sure enough, they still had Michael Young, they still had Ian Kinsler. Those were kind of the foundations offensively. Kevin Millwood and Vicente Padilla were the anchors of the pitching staff. And then, over the next few years, we bring in Vladimir Guerrero. We bring in some veteran guys like Omar Vizquel and Andrew Jones, and you start to see in 2009 the team rise a little bit. And then for whatever reason, 2010, we just really took off. And that's even without having, household names on our pitching staff. CJ Wilson became a starter. Colby Lewis came back to the Rangers from Japan. Rich Harden was our number 2, I believe, and Scott Feldman was our opening day starter. So we were confident. And then we go get Cliff Lee at the trade deadline. So it was a really cool experience. Game 6 of 2011 was the greatest game I've ever been a part of, even in a losing effort. And even though we lost Game 7 beyond that, that was a tough series. But, I realized how blessed I am just to play in 2. I mean, what I always said is Ken Griffey Jr. was my favorite player of all time, and he never played a single World Series game. So I realized how lucky I am at the same time. Be able to do it on the broadcasting side and to be around the team last year was just really neat to see the buzz in the area and around the state of Texas. And I remember it was hard for me to sleep that night that they won. I worked the Valley's postgame show, and I listened to some talk radio on the way home, and just the way that so many fans would call in and talk about relatives that have passed away, and that, or relatives that they grew up connecting with at the ballpark, whether it would be, 2 ballparks ago or the ballpark in Arlington or whatever it is. It's just really neat to hear some of those stories. And that's when I kind of realized, a lot of times as a fan base and as a sports community, a fan will say we, and a lot of times you're like, well, they didn't really do anything on the field. They're not necessarily part of it. But when I got to see the World Series trophy and I got to hear some of the stories, I feel like that resonated in terms of that, because it makes you realize how, the players, the front office, the people that are there every day, they get the job done. But I think you realize that the team wouldn't be there without the fans. And there is like this all-encompassing community and family aspect of it where maybe in a distant way, the trophy is, it does belong to the fans in a way. And whether it's symbolic, I don't know if I can put the right words to it, but it was an emotional time. I got to work the parade and just lots of instances. So when you're talking about the All-Star game, I think it just, what a year for Rangers fans. We bring home a World Series title, and then the All-Star game happens here. And then a few weeks after that, then Adrian Beltre is going into the Hall of Fame. So talk about an organization that had experienced such a drought for a while, and this is such a fruitful year.
Wow, that's great. Very well said. Final thought from you. What do you think about the Baylor guys? Davis Wenzel, who's up with the Rangers right now, and then Cody Bradford, who unfortunately, as we talk, is still on the injured list. Nice to have those guys in the majors, and hope they see a lot of innings here in the future.
Absolutely. I think as alumni to the program, we want nothing more than to see guys get up to the big leagues and thrive in the big leagues. We saw it with Max Muncy for a period of time. We need to get him back out there and healthy. And it's really neat because I talked to Davis just for a minute a few weeks ago when I was working the Kansas City series, because Nick Lofton was playing for the Royals. And it's neat not only to see a Baylor guy on the field, but to see them, playing against each other, or, between Bradford and Wenzel, 2 guys that on the same roster. I feel bad for Cody, just because he's had such a great start to the year. So I'd love to see him get healthy and finish what he started. Shea Langoliers is another name, and he's obviously been a thorn in the Rangers side to this point.
Right.
I actually haven't had a chance to go in the opposing clubhouse and meet him yet. Just my work schedule hasn't lined up to where I've done broadcast against the A's. But just to have plenty of guys from Baylor out there and getting opportunities, you love seeing it. Now you would love to see them take off and achieve all-star type of status and just be guys that are playing at the big league level for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, that'd be great. Fun to see. Well, great to catch up with you. We appreciate your time. Keep up the good work, and we love watching you on Valley Sports. And knowing you're a Baylor guy. Just so proud of you and proud for you. And God bless you and Andrea. And thanks for being on the Sic Em Podcast with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks again for joining us on the Sic Em Podcast, presented by Harley-Davidson of Waco, a sport and story production. If you enjoyed this conversation with David Murphy, head over to BaylorPlus.com or the official Baylor Athletics YouTube channel, where you can watch the premium video version of this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast, leave a review, and tell your friends about us. I'm your host, John Morris, and I hope you'll join us next week for another edition of the Sic Em Podcast.